Ely, Minnesota is known as the sled dog capital of the world, the gateway to the Boundary Waters, home of the International Wolf Center. But that's not all. It's the world headquarters of crapola. No joke, the tasty granola is sold in hundreds of stores across the Midwest. However, crapola did start as a joke.
We were just sitting around and having fun, and we were actually at a party and just made the joke about the play on words there like that you could rearrange the letters of cranberry, apple, and granola to spell crapola, and we just...
Wouldn't it be funny?
And wouldn't it be funny? Yeah, you know how you say things like that, you know, all the time, we should do that, or wouldn't that be funny if someone did that? And somehow I convinced, I guess, myself, and more amazingly, I convinced Andrea that this could be something we could actually do in real life, so.
Brian and Andrea Strom were living off the grid on a small farm near Ely with their 2 children. In June of 2007, for fun, they mixed up a batch of their granola, stuffed it in coffee bags, and sold crapola at the local farmers market and grocery stores. One store printed a flyer that made it onto Jay Leno's headlines on The Tonight Show.
This is why you hire people coming up with professional names. Now locally made crapola.
Yeah, and so literally 4 months after we did this silly thing at the farmer's market, you know, we got this plug by Jay Leno. So, but it was too much too soon. We didn't even have a website.
We had nothing. Yeah.
So.
I never thought we'd be here now in the early days. It just kind of seemed like a funny on the side thing we would do locally. I had no idea we'd blossom into a real full-time business.
So it started as the joke, and then from there we had no plan to do anything else. There was no plan to launch a second flavor, but when it came to that time, we said, well, what should we call our second flavor? And then naturally, number 2 seemed like the perfect name.
Next in line was a red, white, and blue themed granola called Colonial Times. Kissy Poo followed that. Names related to our digestive systems seems appropriate for a high-fiber cereal.
All of our customers are regular.
So the ingredients we use include 5 organic grains. We have oats. Obviously, oats is kind of the base for granola. Organic oats, rye, and barley. Puffed rice and millet are the grains we use in the original recipe of crapola. And then we have a variety of seeds, so flax seed is an important one, and we do grind that prior to mixing it in for increased bioavailability and digestion, as well as sesame seeds and sunflower seeds, almonds and pecans, and then obviously cranberries and apples.
When crapola hit the market, organic farmer Carmen Fernals of Madison had started growing flax. The grain was once grown in abundance for oil and textile markets, but when cheaper cotton outcompeted linens in the 1940s, it almost vanished from the countryside. Because of flax's omega-3 and CLA content, University of Minnesota researchers saw potential in organic food markets and asked Carmen to plant a 10-acre trial plot.
I mowed down 7 of the 10 acres that I planted, but saved the other 3 acres and started a direct market program with a few people. We were putting it into local food co-ops, into some of the local stores, and my wife was always looking at different markets, and she saw this crapola granola in the stores, and she saw the ingredient of flax in there. So she called a gentleman from Ely directly and said, we've got this organic flax, would you be interested? He said, well, we'll give it a try.
Last year, Carmen turned his organic operation over to Luke Peterson, who Carmen had mentored when Luke decided to convert his farm to organic. He now grows 500 acres of certified organic grain.
We have younger people who are looking, what I'd say, outside the box and looking at the history of their grandparents and their parents struggling with trying to make it on big acres with corn and soybeans, and it's not working.
Last summer, Luke planted 40 acres of flax and buckwheat in the Lac-Qui-Parle Wildlife Management Area.
What's kind of cool about this farm is that we planted the flax early. It come into bloom and was wonderful for pollinators. And about the time that that field started losing its flowers, the buckwheat kind of took over. And it's kind of cool because you can stand out here and you can hear all the humming and the buzzing. It's loaded with bees. So
Farmers plant about 2,000 acres in the WMA, ranging from corn and soybeans to alternative crops. Cooperative profit share agreements allow growers to harvest part of the crop in the fall and leave the rest until spring or plant a winter cover crop. WMA manager Walt Gessler points out a corn plot that was seeded between rows with turnips and radishes, which will stay on the ground after the corn is harvested.
And it provides a more diverse food source for the deer that are here over the winter. A number of years ago, we found a number of dead deer that appeared healthy. Well, they were only eating corn, and they died of a disease called acidosis. So we started adding alfalfa, for example, to diversify the food that was available to deer. We'd leave hay out for them to eat, so they wouldn't get sick. And now we've started to diversify it more by adding additional crops within our plantings.
Luke's buckwheat was sold to Seven Sundays in Minneapolis for muesli, and the flax to Brainstorm Bakery for crapola. After the two crops were harvested, Luke planted kernza, a perennial grain crop that will be harvested every fall for about 3 to 5 years. It remains in the ground to provide wildlife habitat and protects the soil from erosion.
We know we're going to be doing this for a long time, and we need to look a long way in the future and try to do the best job we can.
There's so many benefits to just to supporting the local agriculture, local community, local economy, and we just like to be able to know the people that grow our ingredients and meet them and shake their hands and ask about their process and where things come from.
Quality is super important to us. How it's grown is important to us. We have 2 young kids that what they eat is important to us and how we raise them.
The humor is a little bit too much for some people, but by and large, you know, the overwhelming majority of people get the jokes and they, you know, they appreciate the fun, and we feel like laughter is medicine. So in a way, we're you know, putting joy out into the world and humor out into the world, you know, with every bag of granola that we make.